Hi everyone, it's 9 o'clock on a Monday night. That means it's time for Use It or Lose It, a rugby show where we have a look at all the hot talking points in rugby, and in particular at the moment, build up to the Rugby World Cup in Japan later this year, looking at things from a Springbok perspective. Before you do anything else, if you are new to the channel, then go down below the video and hit the subscribe button, and you can hit the bell and you'll be told when any of our videos come on. We're doing quite a few for the Cricket World Cup, most of them from a betting angle. And we're also having, of course, our rugby trademark betting show. That's every Thursday night at 9 o'clock, the handicap rugby chat that matters. Well, on tonight's show, we've got a few interesting topics to talk about. We're going to be talking player management, how best to manage players, how do the South African teams do it, how can we improve. We'll also talk about form versus pedigree. Do you pick a player who is in form, or do you pick the guy who's been there and done that and might just be a little bit out of form at the moment, but building to a World Cup peak? And finally, we'll have a look at it's going to be an interesting chat on the back row, the 6, 7, and 8 jerseys. We'll have a chat and see who those three, or who the top 3 candidates are and who the other boys are that should be going on tour. But let me not waste any more time. I'm going to introduce the guests, starting with Donovan, Unbiased Rugby. Donovan, good to have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Yeah, look forward to your views later on. Just a quick word on your YouTube channel, Unbiased Rugby. How's it going? I see you've been putting out a few videos. I got a notification about half an hour ago.
I'm about I'm just short of 1,300 subscribers. So it's but it seems like I've stayed there for about the last 2 months. So
it reminds me of Twitter. You know, when I started at Twitter, you built up followers very quickly. In those days, and I came on many years ago. In those days, sort of, you followed someone and they tended to follow you back. But it's become a lot more challenging to get followers. Maybe the same thing applies to YouTube. Let's go to the middle of my screen, and that is a Couch Critic down there in George. He's dressed in his umpiring jersey, I think, but he's clearly getting into the World Cup cricketing spirit. How are you, Couch?
How's it, Brent? I'm good. Yeah, it's a Cricket World Cup week starting this week, so I'm psyched, eh?
Excellent. Well, if anybody out there is joining and want to comment on the live chat, they can do. We are going out live now. If you are watching the show recorded, then you should be able to catch those comments on the right-hand side as well. Let's go then. Also down in the Cape is Sean at Judge Rugby. Sean, good to have you on the show. You've been pretty active on Twitter, as you usually are.
Yeah, it was a good weekend of chatter, and thanks for having me, and good to see you guys again.
Excellent. Well, I must say, I decided I wanted to look, because I know you had suggested to me we should chat a little bit about player management. So I started looking down your timeline to find the tweet, because I had seen it where you tweeted on player management. And I scrolled and I scrolled and I scrolled, and then I looked. I thought, I wonder how far I am, and I saw it only 8 hours ago. And then I realized, sure, but I'm going to have to search for this. And I searched for it. And interestingly enough, I did get the tweet I was looking for, but there were also tweets dating back as far as 2017. So this whole player management issue, it's clearly something you feel strongly about.
Yeah, it's it's quite simple. Like, if you look at, I played club rugby and I didn't play at a high level, but like, you get damaged. And to think about these guys that do this as a full-time job, and they do it on the international stage, and then they expect to go back and deliver in club rugby, which is also pretty hectic. Provincial rugby, super rugby, and club rugby overseas. And we need to start looking after the guys more. And I think last weekend we touched on it briefly with how we've been able to churn through players for years and years and years and years, where we've had another guy waiting in the wings. And then you got to look at how we can look after our guys and make sure that they are available after each cycle, because we only run our guys for 4 years essentially.
Yeah, I must say, I played club rugby as well to sort of my mid-20s, and I used to play, I think it was something ridiculous, like 12 games a year, Sean. I mean, at the end of those 12 games, I was absolutely buggered. And you look at the amount of games guys are playing now, where you see guys running on for their 150th Super Rugby performance. It is just amazing. And yes, obviously, they've got the benefit of quality sort of medical staff at their beck and call and that. But, I mean, there's got to be a price to pay for the body.
Yeah, listen, you can have the best people look after you, you're still going to get hurt. And remember, the guys are playing at such a higher level, and they're playing against harder guys, and there's travel involved. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that really affects everyone. I just think we need to look at it a little bit more. The Kiwis have been playing with sabbaticals for a while, and we can say what we want about it, but the guys come back, they're well rested, they generally come back and perform. I know the Aussies are having a bit of a moan about Pocock, who's probably going to announce his retirement from Super Rugby and the Wallabies in the next few days. But they sent him on a sabbatical, so now they're a little bit iffy about that sort of stuff. But in general, and of the greater scheme of things, I think it's the way to go. You know, you give the guys the time off, you give them their break. They know that they get some time to recuperate and actually take their mind off the game. When last did the Beast have a break besides this 2-week enforced break? If you looked at that with Skalkberger a couple of years back, Jean de Villiers, the guys were only ever really taking breaks when they were injured. Now, surely we should be looking at a point where we beat that. We beat that space, that we're not forcing them to be injured to be off, because sometimes the guys are only off when they're injured. If you look at why Joe Marler retired, like he said, he just didn't want to play Test rugby anymore. He just wasn't. It was too much pressure, too much training, too much traveling, too much everything. Like it takes a lot out of these guys, and we need to seriously rethink how we're going to do if we want to like give the guys the support that we like say that we give them, that we want the best for them and all that sort of stuff. Then we need to start putting our money where our mouth is.
Oh, let me go there to Unbiased Rugby now and get his views on that. Player management, Donovan. I mean, I think we all acknowledge it's probably important, but what are we doing wrong here in South Africa that we're not getting it right?
Well, I brought it up with somebody else last week. I was looking at props because I played loose head prop, and so it's like a special place. It's a special place in the scrum for me, and I was looking at the informed players. So the informed players you're looking at was Lizo and Trevor Njinkani playing obviously for the Bulls. Probably had the strongest front row in Super Rugby from the South African sides, and obviously had quite a lot of dominance over most of the sides in Super Rugby. And they've played every single game from the start of the season. So no, I'm not just talking about resting the Springboks, but you can see over the last 2 games that they've played that their form has really dipped drastically, but they're still being played. When just having a week or 2-week break in the middle of a season, getting him a Tanzima to come play on, he needs the experience in any case. And I just think they would be back up there with hitting those numbers that they were before, because they literally are. They're on their last legs at the moment. And I just think it's criminal that they're working the players that hard.
And let me bring Couch in there now, because I know, Couch, you're a big cycling fan. So let me use a bit of a cycling analogy now. I mean, in cycling, it's well known that the last time the Giro Tour de France double was done was 1998. Marco Pantani, who had needles hanging out his arms as he climbed, there was no doubt it was chemically enhanced. The point being, though, that in cycling you have to peak for certain events. You're not going to win every event that you ride in. And yet in rugby, it does seem as though we expect guys to be at their best sort of every Saturday, every year, and it's unrealistic.
No, definitely, Brent. And I actually think that that's almost where you've got to on a biannually or second year almost rotate your players, where you give them those first 3 or 4 weeks off and you make their preseason build up longer, so give them a longer break. And the season is so long that it's almost to your benefit to have 3 or 4 or 6 players joining your squad after week 4. You almost freshen up your squad again. And I think that's a real possibility, especially with some of your youngsters. It's as they've said previously, Donovan said, I think as well, it's not just your veteran Springboks, which is also a side that's important, but some of your youngsters, a Lizo coming through, a 19, a Kerwin Bosch, those kind of guys. You might think, they're youngsters and they can do a lot and they can keep going, but those guys need to take some proper time off and actually build up their bodies. They've still got work to do in terms of physically enhancing and growing and things like that. So, I'd easily say, listen, going into next season, if Cohen had a jam-packed season, to say, listen, take 3 weeks into next season and only come back from season game 4, and then you hit the ground running, physically a bit stronger and bigger and better. And the same, if you might have a few of those bench guys now, and you say, listen, take a bit of a break in the first 3 weeks, and then you come back, and then you can give your beasts and those kind of guys a break again after 4 or 5 weeks. So I think it's almost like you're going to get that trade-off, which I feel is the best way to go. But I'd also I actually think some of the European teams have been doing it well. They've obviously got a big season and a lot of responsibilities, but week in and week out, you see in Pro 14, it's a case of you got to wait for team news because you never know, who's going to be sitting out and who's going to be resting. They just don't roll those guys out week in and week out. They keep their big cannons locked away for the Champions Trophy or Champions Cup, what do they call it? So they roll them out for those big events, Leinster and those kind of guys. So they actually, I don't think, overplay those guys, and that's where you want to get to. And the other big thing is, we almost got a global season now. It's not just like a winter sport that happens over 3 months. These guys are on the go, busy, and especially if you include training, Super Rugby's year is probably 10, 11 months these days. There's I saw the Cheetahs come out with a pic on social media where they say they back in training for the new season. I was like, holy crap, was the previous season finished yet?
Well, some would argue the previous season finished for the Cheetahs actually quite a long time ago, the way they were performing there in the Pro 14. But Sean, let me move across to you now and say, if you look at New Zealand, you've got the New Zealand rugby, which effectively lays down the law to the franchises and says you will play the players only so much in a World Cup here and all of that sort of stuff. Obviously, there we're focusing purely on the All Black players. But is that part of the problem in South Africa that we've got, if that was sort of laid down strict conditions and that, is there going to be a lot of resistance? Because I get the feeling that there is resistance in New Zealand as well, but the guys, at the end of the day, they bow to the greater force, which is the All Blacks.
Yeah, again, we mentioned it last week, but I think the guys on North and South Island are all pulling in one direction, They know the bigger picture. They trust the process. We're still trying to learn our process. We're still trying to understand everything, sort out the different logistical battles that we have with each union. Rassie has put something in place. We did have Springbok sort of rest periods in place a season ago and before, but we've never come out with a sabbatical option. We've never come up with a long-term break. Where a guy wants to go to Japan and he plays in Japan for a season but doesn't play Super Rugby. Like, that wouldn't happen here unless he's completely on a Springbok contract. The Bulls won't pay for a guy's contract and let him go away and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a challenge. They've got it in England. I know that they will have it in Ireland, but the way that the Pro 14 set up, there's a lot of opportunity to give players breaks. So I don't think they enforce it too much. But I know England, where it's week in and week out games that are like you could lose. Realistically, there was a chance of you not getting the bonus points. They started implementing it from next year, I believe, or from sometime this year. But I know that there's a big one taking over soon. And we've got to start getting with it. Australia haven't really done too much of it, to be fair. I think Pocock was the first guy they sent on a sabbatical. But to be very honest, he's worth it, So, like, I think that's out of... they're trying to... I think if we look at the point of trying to get a guy... Like, what about if I say to you, let's make sure the Beast is ready to play against the British and Irish Lions? Everyone would say, no, he's too old. He's way past his sell-by date. He's this, he's that. The fact of the matter, he's good. He's classy. And if we manage him properly, there's a chance that he could make it. I wouldn't mind that option. Can we afford it or not? It's a bigger story. I don't know.
What sort of resistance will you get from the players themselves the way things are set up? Because I'm also looking at things, I don't know how the players' contract's structured. Obviously, that's where maybe the whole thing comes in. If a player misses out, he doesn't get match fees. And then there's the other side of it, which I suppose doesn't apply to your top box. But if you're starting to rest a guy that's, let's say, up and coming, but you're trying to manage him, and he's worried that someone else is going to step in that position and effectively play better than him.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And like, for me, that's when I want to talk squads and I want to talk like players that are like in the mix and you tell the guy, listen, I can't play you. If you first choice and you're playing all the time, you're pretty much guaranteed your spots. Like that is the one thing. So then there won't be that Springbok rest. But where we're not doing is we're not benching a Faf de Klerk and a Willie Leroux and Malcolm Marx. We're not doing that. Like even that is to bench a guy and then bring him on later. That's player management, and we don't even do that. Like, we want to play the best team all the time, over and over. And it's great and I want it, but we are not going to grow our base. We are not going to get better as a squad if we don't start giving the guys those chances. We're going to go to the World Cup. I want to make sure that we go to the World Cup with players that are ready to play, that I'm happy will play. I don't want to go there with a guy where we've got 2 injuries and a guy's on the bench and you're thinking, shit, I hope nothing happens because I don't want him playing. Like, I'm scared something's going to happen in a tight game. And we shouldn't be there. And the more experienced guys have, the more they trust everything, the better things go. The man inside him trusts what he's going to do. The man outside trusts what he's going to do. Just makes the conversation and things a little bit more settled for me.
Yeah, and Donovan, just bringing you in there. I mean, there's a World Cup here, so I suppose player management's right on the top of everyone's agenda, and everyone probably understands the need for player management. But, you know, the point there also being made is people do want to see the top players every week. So if you have a look at a situation that the Lions are now playing and Marks gets rested, you know, maybe the people who were going to go to Ellis Park say, well, you know, I don't want to go in that. I mean, there's also that factor to consider.
Yeah, look, I think Marks has been played way too much this year in any case. Even last year, I could see that injury that he got in, I think it was Australia or New Zealand. That was a direct result of just playing too much rugby. But the other big concern, what Sean was trying to hint at, if you look at a New Zealand side and Ryan Crotty gets injured or he's not playing or something, there's another player that's just a few % lower than him that fills in that slot. And now look at somebody like Andre Pollard, who now is injured, and I'm not saying Mani Labok's a bad player. He's a really good player, but he hasn't played. He probably played 30 minutes this year. So yeah, here's this player got to come in and he's got to fill in the spot, and he just hasn't had game time. So it's almost like we're not creating the depth in any case. So having a forced rest of these top players or all the players will obviously create a little bit more depth. That's my opinion. I just think that if I I follow the Bulls, so I know most of the players there. But you know, they've got 4 Springboks that are out now, and their season's over. It's completely over because the players that are filling in those spots just haven't had the game time, and they just don't have that kind of the temperament to play at that kind of level. And I think by resting the players, not only do we save our top players, but we also create that kind of depth.
So who makes that? Where does it come from? Do the Bulls, for example, take a decision and say, right, we're going to start resting our players now, even though we may be playing against a Shark side that is playing with their full side and are going to beat it? Or do the franchises need to get together, or does a directive have to come from somewhere up higher?
Well, I think if I look at, I think the Bulls, they rolled the dice early on the season to play their Springboks earlier to hopefully winning the games, and that just didn't happen. Now they come to the end of the season, they can't play their Springboks, and so they're a bit stuck. So I don't know how the directive works in New Zealand. I don't know if New Zealand say, listen, this month you have to have 1 weekend off, and then the franchise gets to choose, or I'm not sure. Somebody's going to have to try explain that to me. But I think it needs to be managed a little bit better, because it looks like the players are being rested now when they could have been rested all the way through the season at different times.
And Couch, bringing you in there, I mean, money's obviously a big factor. One of the things that struck me, I can't remember who it was a couple of seasons ago, he played like a whole season of Super Rugby and internationals, and just when you thought he was having a rest, he popped over to Japan to play for a couple of months and sort of got back in time for Super Rugby training. So I mean, the players tend to be drawn by the overseas money as well. And I guess ultimately that's an area you got to try and take care of if you want the players to rest.
No, definitely, Brent. I mean, the player knows he's got a 10-year period, or, you know, there could be injuries and stuff like that. So it's almost like they try and cram in as much as they can. I mean, that's unfortunately the nature of the beast. And I know it's only going to be for the top few, but I actually think that that's a tiny step towards the right direction, where Rassie would hopefully have his contracting system, is that it'll rely more on fixing a guy on a permanent contract instead of this per game fee, as you talk about. So that you know, creates less of that stress, you know, and you know that, listen, you guarantee this amount of money whether you play or not. And I actually think Sean's one is I'd almost go away from a sabbatical and say that, you know, why not with Pollard before he did this move, say, listen, we organize you a Japanese deal for 2 seasons, and, you know, it's a lot less stress on your body, and you don't come back and play Super Rugby, you know. Imagine you can come back and play certain test matches, you know, the Rugby Championship, and that's it, and your Jap games, and do that for 2 seasons. I mean, the big thing is, I think Pollard's like 23, something like that, 24. I mean, he's still a youngster, and to us, he feels like, he's 30 because he's been playing forever. The toll that must have taken on his body already is huge. He's playing the big test matches. He's got a number of tests behind his belt already. I mean, his body literally won't hold that. And the same argument that you had with, I think a good example now is Robert du Preez. He just kept on playing. He did that stint with Sale, and he's just kept on going, and now he's going back there again. But I mean, I personally think his drop in form was due to that over exertion and exhaustion. I think he's just bloody tired at this stage. But then I also wanted to say, I think the big thing that's important in terms of, and that's why we call it player management is, injuries that's you're forced into it. You can't do anything about it. Player management, it's in your hands. You can decide it. So that's in terms of this building the depth and building people who can set in, is that instead of taking a Bulls team and saying, yeah, let a youngster go into a team that's playing without Lewitt, without Dwayne Vermeulen, Pollard, and maybe Warwick or someone, you take two of those guys out who are resting for 3 weeks and you play a youngster, and then you rest the other two senior guys. So, that's the difference between player management and injury. Injury is gone. You can do nothing about it. Player management, you can decide, if you've got a scrum off and a fly off for experience, give the one a rest and try a youngster for 2 games. Because often, even in your Springboks setup, we say, oh, we're giving the youngsters a shot, and then they play just youngsters. And I think it's important. And what you see in the Crusaders setup and that kind of thing is, it's 1 or 2 or 3 players who come into a settled setup, and it's not all of a sudden 10 new names, and now they've got to try and scrap and find their feet. And I think that's the key to this whole player management, is managing it effectively and at the right time and the right place.
And Sean, just perhaps in closing, I mean, any final thoughts from yourself? Hein did mention the fact about a Pollard coming back from Japan. I guess the one concern for me there is the standard is lower, it is less physical. And maybe when a player gets back from Japan, he's actually not at peak and ready to play internationals.
Yeah, I think that also rests a lot on the player, on the individual. I have no problem with if a guy wants to go and play in Japan for 1 season and he misses a Super Rugby season, and we do that once, like that's almost a step in the right direction for me. With greatest respect to Japan and the top league, but they're also not allowed to play as many foreign guys at the same time, so the players will get rested there anyway. I know the way of life there is different, and everything's great there. Like the guys are pretty relaxed there, so I don't have an issue with it. And I love what you said about like when they bring players into like a Crusaders and an All Black setup and a more established setup like Saracens, Leinster, stuff like that. When a youngster makes his debut and goes in there, he looks on either side of him. He's got form, he's got experience, he's got a level head, all settled around him that he can look at for assistance. When we are naming squads, and a while back we named squads and we had one Springbok cap between our 3 scrum halves, like who's looking up to who? When it gets pressure arrives, who's looking up to who? Who's guiding who? We've got so many guys that are scrambling, trying to find themselves because they're trying to play themselves back into form. And for me, that's what's happened with Willie Leroux. I think he just needs a break. I think if you look at how Siya Kolisi played for the last 2 weeks, he stepped up as a captain. He stepped up as a player. He had a 2-week break before that. Now, are we going to be clever enough and make sure that he has another little bit of a mini break before the World Cup, because we need him? Like, and that's the thing. It's like it's player management, and it's up to us it's up to the coaches to make those hard, tough calls. But you've got to do it for the greater good. I mean, would you rather Pollard play 40 minutes and then you put Libok on, or would you rather Pollard's out for 3 games because of an injury? Like, that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good way to look at it. And Couch, I'm going to come across to you now, because I think this can probably lead into our form versus pedigree sort of discussion as well. Players do tend to come back from injuries and perform well, and I was exceptionally impressed with Kolisi the last couple of weeks as well. What were your thoughts on that? I know you wanted to chat a little bit about the picking players on form versus pedigree.
Well, Brent, the one part of that, you touched on it earlier, is that a player might not want to sit out, a youngster especially. Imagine Cohen Bosch is just starting, and now you say, listen, you've played 8 games, you got to sit out 2 games, and he's saying, listen, I want to grab this opportunity now to stake my claim as a starting fly off, and now you're telling me, I have to go ride the bench or I have to take a break. So it's also a fine line in terms of that. So there's also that. So it's important, especially in your World Cup time, where you almost, what the All Blacks did, they've taken non-negotiables. They said, listen, Brodie Retallick, he's definitely there. And I actually heard someone say that, Kieran Reid to them is not that influential anymore. He's not on form, things like that. Hansen doesn't give a damn. He's like, Kieran Reid is going to be there. He's going to be the man in the semi-final for me. I want him in the park. I want him making decisions. Akira Ioane can be how instrumental playing for the Blues and electrifying and whatever. You want that steady head and just the calm influence that a Kieran Reid can give you. And that's like, whether he steps out of the hospital, I think, and steps straight into the first World Cup game. If he's fit and he's running, he's in. And I think it's important, identifying those guys and saying, listen, these are the guys that are non-negotiable. And then obviously you might have a few in-betweens there, almost for us a case of, is a Billy Leroux, a non-negotiable? Or should we be saying, listen, Warwick is having a great season, or whoever it might be, I'm just using an example and saying that overrides it. And the other thing is, in thus far in our discussions, we've always said, and I've often gone back to it saying, this guy's already been in the system. So we've also got to say, where's that line being drawn where we say this guy's in the system, but we'd like Kobus Reinach coming in. So, where's that line between, yes, we're taking current form, Reinach's been nominated player of the month or player of the season or whatever, that side, he's great, we need him in, but we're telling Mapimpi, sorry man, Yanti was in the system already, your form's great, but you're not going to make the bus. So those are the type of arguments which are tough ones, but we're going to have to, think about.
Yeah, it's easy. I mean, a lot of these topics they're quite easy to discuss and debate, but if you're actually in the position of having to make those decisions, it's not that easy. Donovan, any thoughts on the whole form v pedigree discussion?
Yeah, I'll go back to my favorite players, the props. If I just look at loosehead that we have in this country, obviously we've got the Beast. Guy's got 100 tests. So if he hasn't played the whole of Super Rugby, he's going to step onto the field. Not that he knows the systems. He's been there, done it. He's got the T-shirt, so he'll be able to manage himself in that kind of game. But looking at form, the next player that Stephen Kitsoff, and then I start looking at, well, who's been the informed loosehead this year? And it's probably been Lizo. So I'm going, now that's a hard choice because I know Stephen Kitsoff's got that explosiveness and he has been in the system, but Lizo has been on really good form. Luckily, we can take 3 looseheads if that's the case. But it is a tough one. Coming back to Makazole and Pimpi, I honestly feel he is the best wing at the moment. He scores tries almost every single week, and I'm trying to think who he would replace. And I'm just. It is a tough one. I just felt like a few years ago, or maybe 20 years ago, maybe I'm going way past them, that there used to be not trials and things like that, but people were looked at with form, and it just seems like a lot of people are just getting into the team on reputation, and it's a tough one for us here. I'm not 100% sure how you would do it, but you've got to reward form at some point.
That's it. I tend to be more in the form camp than the pedigree camp personally. I do believe there are players out there that you pick no matter what. Kieran Reid, perhaps a good example for New Zealand, where a lot of people say, and Hein included, pick him. I'm saying, is it maybe one World Cup far for a Kieran Reid? He is starting to show signs, perhaps, of being injury prone. I see Hein laughing because you've had this discussion before. But there is that line that needs to be drawn. Sean, where do you draw that line?
It's very difficult if you look at it purely from your starting teams. Like, I'm going to break it down and pull it away to a squad. And I don't know if it's maybe just a cop-out, or maybe I think it's a cop-out of some sorts. But like, if we have a look at a squad, if you look at how we could bring Lizo Goboka into the squad, but then we need to, because we're going to take 5 props. So are we going to have one that can play both sides, or do we need 3 tight loose heads when we've got the Beast and Kitsoff there already? I don't know. It's so tough. But the truth is, we're taking 31 guys to the World Cup, and someone's going to miss out somewhere. And this conversation would be so much more different if we're busy talking for the June test next year, because we're not focusing on the World Cup. We're looking at the Lions a year later, and and it does change things. So it's almost like we're pot committed in a way, and Russie's hasn't had long to put his stamp on things. You know, he's still trying to teach the guys stuff. The guys are still trying to understand him, and he's still trying to find his way on the international scene. With, if you understand what I'm saying, like he's not like, so there's so much. So I think the less moving parts that he needs to manage is probably the best. But I don't want to go to a World Cup with guys in the squad that I'm not 100% happy to play a game. Like, we look at Willie Leroux, he's not in form at the moment. He's definitely the first choice 15. And when he plays well, he really cooks. So does he need a break? And then we have guys around him that are they capped? Damien Willemse seems to be very much in the mix. And I think it's because he's exceptionally talented, but I think Rassie wants to work with him and push him to 10 eventually and have him as a 10-15 cover. Then we've got a place for one other guy, I reckon. Is it Dylan Lates? Will he cover, because he covers 15 left wing, right wing? I don't know. Do we going to have Ches and Colby fill that space, or will Colby fill somewhere else? The nice thing about Mapimpi is Makazole Mapimpi covers left and right wing, and for me, he's definitely the form winger. I think he's the best left wing and the best right wing at the moment. So it's such a, you know, we're going to miss out on stuff. I just want to make sure that our balance is right all round. Like, we have guys that are competing for spaces all round, guys that if we give Willie a break, the other two guys are perfectly capable of doing it. And then Willie can come back and come off the bench, be very hungry again, and then start hitting his stride. But, you know, if you look at locks, we're going to leave a big name lock behind. I was talking today about it, but between Arke Snyman, Lotte Jager, and Franco Mostert, I think we're leaving someone behind. And that's not even saying that Peter Steph-Toy is going to go as a lock. So, you know, how are we going to do it? How are we going to fix it? Do most Springbok caps and not form count?
Going to be interesting, and it'll actually certainly next week we want to discuss the tight five as well. But if you are looking to follow Judge on Twitter, it's at Judge Rugby, and I can tell you there's plenty of good discussion on team selections and anything else rugby related. Couch, anything more on this topic before we move on to the back row?
Yes, Brent, I just want to go on that, you know, as we said, the big thing to note this year is it's a special year. So I think your normal argument couldn't you know, be valid here. It's you know, abnormal things for this situation. But the interesting thing is, you know, we always look to New Zealand for the template these days because they're doing everything better. And I mean, their system has always been, they go on pedigree. You know, you got to really knock that door down, and it's almost the case of the guy who was in there has to falter instead of the guy who's coming up has to knock him over. So that's, and you know, maybe that's something that's valid. You know, maybe it's something that's not too far wrong, and especially in World Cup. Yeah, obviously, I mean, there are a few things that you can take out, like, you know, was Dayanti, you know, ever really settled, as you know, he's got 30 test caps as a left winger, so you know that's an easier comparison to make and say let's take Mapimpi. But again, you know, now you got to teach a new guy the system. I mean, they pretty much haven't even got Dayanti into the defensive system because he's just shooting up every time. So they're busy trying to get that into him. Imagine how long it's going to take Mapimpi, because clearly it's got to be quite complicated. But so it's a tough one. But then at the same time, again, as we said on the loose end, I mean, there's just no ways he's going to throw a Kitsoff away now. I mean, he's come with the system. He's incredibly experienced, and personally, you know, we'll get to the props, but I don't think he'll take 3 loose ends. I mean, tight end would be your third if you had to take a third, or a guy who can play both. But so and that's incredibly unfortunate for Lizo, because as you know, we've all said he's in incredible form, and I think he's you know, heads and shoulders the form Lucid. But that's the prime example, you know, is sorry, you know, Beast just isn't up for negotiation. He's going, and again, you know, there's a case of rest him. You know, rest him for the rest of Super Rugby if you want, and say, you know, and the argument will be made so much easier if the Sharks had to let fall out of the running, and they'll be just like, okay, there's no use, just rest the guy. And that's, you know, coming back to our first topic is, you know, the pressure on the coaches is also such that they don't want to rest guys. Because I mean, there's just no ways that Robert is saying, no, let's just leave Beast out, and I'm going to play my backup loose end, and I'm going to lose games, and I'm going to get fired. So that is the harsh reality. So yes, I just think my personal point of view is you've pretty much, you know, Vili's a good example. He's he hasn't, faltered in South Africa that we've seen. And maybe unless he starts in Rugby Championship and is horrific, he's definitely going to go, and he's going to go as the starting 15, because again, you'd have to teach Colby or test Colby in the setup as a starting 15, which he hasn't really done. So he hasn't really got a backup 15, and you can't create that in 3 games time.
I'm pleased you mentioned Rob, because he probably comes under pressure at home as well with team selection, never mind all the other things that he's got to put up with. But I think that pretty much takes us on to the final topic of the night. And I'm going to start with Donovan. And Donovan, before I actually go into the topic, tell me a little bit about that rugby jersey behind you. Is that a Leinster jersey?
Yes. One of my subscribers actually sent me the jersey. So he sent me and Gordon a jersey, and he said to me he'll send me any Pro 14 team. So I said, just send me your favorite team, and I'll support them going forward. So yeah, I'm a Leinster supporter now. So
yeah, they played brilliant rugby, and they were full value on the weekend as well. But very nice that subscribers send that. Just any subscribers of this channel, I actually prefer cash personally. But yeah, if you want to send a jersey, that's also okay.
But you got a jersey, and then you bagged yourself a Pro 14 title in the first week. Well done.
That's it. Hey, Donovan, so let's move into the loose forwards now. Let's start at position number 8. I would imagine Vermeulen is on most people's lips. We did have a discussion a few weeks ago about Whiteley and Vermeulen. How are you feeling on the number 8 position? Is it cast in stone?
Yeah, I think if Warren can get past his injuries at the moment, I think those are going to be the two 8s that we take. It's quite sad, because I was actually doing the research today when I was looking at the topic, and I started just looking at the players that are in form and just trying to see, I know Daniel Dupree's playing really well. He's had a really, really good season, and he has been in the system, but maybe not as much as Warren or Dwayne. Then I was looking at Kwagga Smith, Marcel Coetzee. He's also had an exceptional season. So, but you're only going to ever take 2 number 8s. So it's I think it's going to be Warren and Dwayne. I think it's cast in stone. If Warren's injured, I'd say probably he'd go with Dan Dupree. That's my personal. I'd say if Warren was injured, he'd go with Dan, because I think Dan's more like for Dwayne. But then I started looking around and going, okay. So now I'm looking at the real informed number 8s around the world. The Billies and the CJs, and I'm going, are our number 8s Dwayne? I think Dwayne's comparable to those. They can be in the same kind of conversation. So I think at number 8, I think if Dwayne's fit and ready, I think he's our starting number 8.
Right. Sean, I'm going to go across to you now. I'm going to put something out there to you straight away. I wouldn't take Warren Whiteley, and I wouldn't take him purely on the basis of that he's so injury prone. I think as a coach, there comes a point where a player is too injury prone. And I think for me, I would be looking for Vermeulen, yes, but I'd be looking elsewhere for an alternative. And I wouldn't be taking Whiteley just purely on the basis of risk that he gets injured too much.
Yeah. What are the rulings on injuries? I know that there is actually a ruling on a World Cup injury, and when you can change them out. I'm not sure.
Yes, I'm not sure. I think it's basically, once a tournament started, I stand to be corrected there. Or once it gets to a certain point, maybe before, I think you can't. Yeah, if you lose a player, you lose the player. I mean, if you think about New Zealand in the World Cup, I think it was the last World Cup, 2015, where you had third choice fly off. What's his name? The Beaver.
Stephen Donald.
Yes, yeah. I mean, he was the worst. How did a guy ever win a World Cup medal is beyond me. But anyway, he was the third choice. I mean, you had Cart injured. Can't remember the other one, but he was effectively came in and played. And but I think he was in the squad all along.
Yeah. So he wasn't in the squad, but I think there was that kind of that cooling off period somewhere. So what I think is going to happen, I think Vermeulen is going. Like that, he's one of those guys. He's going. There's no doubt about it. I think Whiteley's going if he's fit, and I think that's Russie's call and his decision. I think failing, let's say Whiteley's not available, I think Marcel Coetzee absolutely has to be. Marcel Coetzee has been rolling with the big boys in the Pro 14, and I think it's between him and Dan, and I would take Marcel Coetzee purely based on once it comes to that level of that balance of experience and form and, been to a World Cup, has he? I'm not sure, but I mean, he's got 29 caps or 30 caps. So for me, he would go. And I think, but I think I'm going to squeeze. I'm happy to have Marcel Coetzee in the squad, and he can play flank as well. And you could rest Pieter-Steph du Toit, move Pieter-Steph du Toit to thing. So Coetzee's going for me. It just depends where you want me to put him.
Right. Well, yeah, as you say, you can cover at flank as well. Couch, your thoughts on that? Do you think I'm being a bit harsh on Whiteley?
Well, firstly, I'm with Sean that Coetzee, Marcel he should be going, and I'm with Donovan. I'm a big fan of like for like, So the problem for me there is, unless you Adi Sevilla who can really come up and be like a firecracker off the bench, which I don't think Warren Whiteley is, then you got to say, what's he going to do there? He's going to play 1 or 2 games in the B team, and as I say, I don't really see him as a big bench impact player. Then I'd rather have a like for likely replacement for Dwayne Vermeulen, which to me is Dan du Preez locally. I mean, obviously Marcel could come into that conversation, but again, to me he's a little bit of a Northern Hemisphere 8 and not really our type of 8, quite as explosive as we like to have a number 8. But I'm not saying he can't do the role. But I like the fact that he could play 6 and 8, so I'd have him in the squad and maybe then not bother with 8. But I'll probably give Dan a good run in the rugby championship, and I've seen, listen, show me what you can do at the next level. As I say, I think going forward, he is the next best thing in South Africa to Dwayne Vermeulen. So he'll definitely be knocking on that door. But obviously, there's just no going away from Dwayne. Dwayne is your number 1, and unfortunately, I mean, I love the oak, I love the spirit he plays the game in. I'm a huge Warren Whiteley fan, but to me, he wouldn't get a ticket.
Yeah, I'm with you. I must say that I really do enjoy Whiteley. And in fact, I mean, it's something that us betting people tend to look for. The moment Warren Whiteley is not in that Lions side, we normally on the opposition, Hein, because the Lions just aren't the same side with him. So he brings so much. I just feel that he hasn't been able to string a real run of games together. And I think, and as Sean rightly says, it's Rassie's call at the end of the day. There's going to be a point, even if Whiteley is fit going into the World Cup, there's got to be that question mark hanging over him about, what are the odds of him actually staying fit throughout the World Cup? And anyone can get injured, but you just feel the way the guy's track record is going, there's going to be a little bit of risk on that one. But Couch, I'll stay with you for the number 7 jersey.
I was one of the first people 12 months ago who said, why in the world would you want to move your best number 5 lock to number 7? And then he became our best number 7 as well. So I mean, that's I wouldn't move away from Pieter-Steph du Toit in any way, shape, or form. I think he's been brilliant there. And obviously the game that we play, I just some people have talked about moving Kolisi out to 7 because he isn't really a specialist fetcher at 6, and then maybe playing Marcel, which is a relevant argument because Marcel isn't a small 6, so at least you keep that. But to start, for starters, I like Pieter-Steph du Toit at 7, and we'll get to the 6 conversation later. But I think we've got enough fetcher type players, around who help out to be able to cope without a starting 6 who's in that role. So for me, it's Pieter-Steph du Toit, and then again, back up the same type of number 7 that I like would be Jean-Luc du Toit. So he'd be the backup 7, in terms of like for like. Obviously, as soon as we start to talk about the mix of the squad, he might fall out again because he isn't movable. Then you could almost go back to a Dan and saying, shouldn't Dan then rather go as the 8? And I'm sure he can prop in at number 7 if needs be in a difficult situation.
Yeah, good point. That the flexibility of the players is key. Donovan, number 7 jersey, Pieter-Steph, home and host.
Yeah, I think I fully agree. I think Pieter-Steph du Toit is probably our best 7. I was trying to look at players that were playing overseas at the moment, and I always get confused because I know there's blind side and open side, but I'm sure we do it opposite to the rest of the world. But so I always get confused when I'm trying to do my research because it just never makes sense. But so I was doing my research of the players I could be talking about 6s, but there's some players that we've forgotten about that are starting to come back into form. We're talking Jaco Kriel. These are the kind of players that are out there at the moment. And I've been watching their last couple of games, and they haven't been that bad, and they're getting back into form. So I just don't want to forget the kind of players that we have in our books, because if we took 2 years ago, Jaco Kriel was probably our best player in the loose trio. And he seems to be a player that we've completely forgotten about. And and he is still playing. He's playing really well.
Yeah, so not to forget about him. I must say, you mentioned him. It's so true what you said, because, I mean, I hadn't even thought of him, Jaco Kriel, as possibility. I hadn't really seen much of him lately. Sean, what do you think of, first of all, before you go onto the jersey itself, a player like Jaco Kriel, any chance someone like that and someone who we aren't really talking about can sneak in?
Yeah, I think, listen, Kriel's there and thereabouts. Is not maybe doing it as well as he was in the past. I think in terms of open side flankers and the form guys at the moment, Chris Clutty for Munster is cooking. But the guys complain that he's a penalty machine. That's what your open side flanker does. Especially if you want a fetcher. But going to go to the blind side flank. Pieter-Steph du Toit, I also put my hand up and have some humble pie. I was very against it. I thought that Etzebeth and du Toit were incredible lock pairing. I thought we were sorted there and we just needed to fix the loosies. But he's now become the best. I do, Hein, like your hybrid of Jean-Luc du Toit. I think he'd be pretty badass if we could somehow merge them together. But Pieter-Steph du Toit, I think here comes something that's going to be a little bit of a spanner, but Reinhard Alstad for Toulouse has been incredible this season. There's something, but I still think Marcel Coetzee could fit in behind Pieter-Steph du Toit. I think Alstad is definitely more in the conversation than Jaco Kriel at the moment for a Lucy position. But I don't know how many Lucy's we're taking. Are we taking 2 8s and then one blind side that can play lock and then a dedicated blind side 4?
I see Donovan putting up his hand. Donovan?
And I was just looking at previous squads, and it's normally 2 8s and then four either 6s or 7s. So, but then last year, I think the last World Cup, I think we took one specialist number 8. So we took Dwayne Vermeulen, and that was it.
I think the big thing is deciding on, if you take Pieter-Steph du Toit, they might go light on a lock. So in that case, they'll play the 6 Lucies and 3 locks. Alternatively, you're going to play 5 Lucies and 4 locks. So I think that's the big shuffle around, basically.
Okay, so if I was I'll pick 2 guys per position then I would say Pieter-Steph du Toit, definitely a blind side, and then it's between, I don't know if Dan du Preez is going to come in the mix. I must say I haven't been watching him focusing too much on him, but I think he's more on the 8. So Marcel Coetzee and Reinhard Alstad down there, but I think Coetzee would get it for me personally.
Right, and that's 2 players. That's the number 7 jersey, Sean. So let's stay with you to move on to the number 6 jersey, which I think is an easier discussion than it probably was the last time we chatted about it, given the form of Khaleesi the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer for me. Even since the first show we had when we discussed the captain, he's our captain and he's there to stay. It doesn't matter who likes it and who doesn't. And he's showing some great form, showing some good leadership. So just purely on his rugby ability, he's a different type of flanker. He is playing a little bit in the outside channels, and we saw it this weekend and last weekend. And he scored tries like that for the Springboks, where he's broken through the midfield, and that seems to be a space where he excels. And when he needs to tighten up, he doesn't do a terrible job. So when he tightens up for the Springboks, he's just not doing that wild stuff. People seem to think that he's gone walkabout. In actual fact, he hasn't. He's just kind of not really into his sort of style of play. Picking another flanker behind Sia, I would say that because of how we play and how we play our captain and how we're going to play Sia, I would then pick a new guy or someone new coming through. I'd love to get Chris Clutty in the mix. If I wouldn't mind letting him have a look in. It's probably a rugby championship option, but I don't know who else to pick. I don't think Jaco Kriel's too much in the mix. We might go for a big guy there. Maybe Marcel Coetzee fits in there, and then Dan moves to blind. I'm happy to have Marcel 6, 7, or 8. You guys can decide.
Yeah, as long as he goes, eh? Han, let me bring you in there on the number 6 jersey. First, I want to ask: Did you watch that little clip that was going around on Twitter with the cause of commentary there for Khaleesi's try.
That was absolutely brilliant. They really get psyched up for that. That was fantastic. And as Sean says, he is very effective in that slightly looser role and finding those gaps, and he does run strongly there. So I mean, it's fine for him to do that if someone else picks up the other stuff. I just think Khaleesi isn't the traditional six, so we got to remember that your actual open side is a Marshall Coetzee. I mean, he is first and foremost a fetcher who gets down there and gets over the ball and isn't easy to dislodge. And then lately we've seen you can move that type of guy to your number 8 as well, which they've done with Pocock, and Rassie is quite a believer that your number 8 is actually a better fetcher than your number 6. But I mean, obviously in Northern Hemisphere, like CJ Standard does at 8, you do a lot of ball carrying, and Marshall has bulked up quite a bit, so he does do a dual role. I mean, I would never play him at 7. To me, he's a shorter guy. There you'd say it's between Elstad and John Luke for me to be your 7 replacement behind Peter Steff. So no, my 2 would definitely be Sia. And the nice thing with Khaleesi, if you do opt to go for the 5 loose forwards, is that Khaleesi does dovetail as both. You can buy 6 or 7 for me. So if you want to keep your captain on the park, you can move Khaleesi to 7 and bring Marshall in at 6. Or depending on how Dwayne is puffing, you can always have Marshall at 8. So in terms of my game day squad, it's going to be Khaleesi, Peter Steff, the toy, and Dwayne with Marshall Coetzee on the bench. I agree with Sean. He's very versatile, so he'll cover everything there. So that's how it looks. And yeah, if you got that extra person, then it could either be a Dan or a John Luke who can cover in the squad.
Excellent. Donovan, anything to add to the number 6 discussion?
No, I think we pretty much settled on Sia Khaleesi there. The one thing I do like about Sia is probably one of the best counter ruckers that we have, and I've seen him do it at international level. So I know that he has the skill to be able to do that. He just has he has a technique of doing it that's really well. And a lot of people do talk about traditional fetchers, and we've got more than enough fetchers in the side that aren't in the loose trio. That it's actually quite nice to have somebody who can really counteract, because he does get it right, and absolutely correct. I think he's really good in that midfield, and I think he plays really well. Coming in after him, I don't know. I just feel like there's quite a big drop off, because there's no real like for Sia Khaleesi. So. Yeah, probably. Marcel Coetzee, probably. I've seen him play. I've really enjoyed the way that he plays. So yeah, I think for me, Sia Khaleesi, Peter Steff, Detroit, Dwayne Fermanagh to start. I think that's where I'm settled at the moment.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to get a lot of arguments there. Anything to add on this, guys? I think we've exhausted that topic. Anything else on that one before we move off, guys? Thanks very much. I just want to say, I'll ask one question of you before we leave the show, and Donovan, I'll start with you. South Africa's first World Cup game against New Zealand. How many points? I think we can assume New Zealand will start favourites. How many points favoured should New Zealand be for that game, in your opinion?
None.
Level game.
None. That's South Africa going to win that game.
Can I put a punt down? Hey, Brent, we got to get involved there, man.
Would you mind laying me some bets? No, I'm only kidding. But you reckon we can win that game, eh?
No, I reckon we can. We beat them in New Zealand. Anything's possible on the day, and I think if the right players playing on the day, anything's possible. I really honestly believe anything's possible. And if I'm not going to support the Springboks on that day, then who the hell is?
But do you think? I mean, it's fair to say that New Zealand will start favourites with, let's call it, the bookmakers.
No, of course.
But you would be backing. You think the Boks have got a strong chance?
I think they do, and I said it the last time I was there. I honestly believe that the team that wins that game will win the World Cup.
Yeah, that's a fair comment, because although I suppose the one thing is the team that wins that game does have a hard. Well, there's going to be no easy games in the playoffs, but I think you're drawn then to play England probably in the semi-finals. That's quite a tough one. Let me go on to Couch now and say, Couch, you obviously know the bookmakers' odds. I think it's probably around about a 15-point that they're giving New Zealand. Am I right?
Oh, no, Brent, I don't check games that far out. I only check outright betting. But I was going to say I'd be surprised if it's any under 10 points. It'll definitely be a double figure handicap. But I must say, if you're giving the All Blacks a 2-try head start in a game that they only have to win, then the Boks actually might have a chance of sticking it in there. But, as punters, I'd probably be on the first half handicap there.
Okay. And Sean, I'll end off with you. What do you think? I mean, as things stand now, you had to just put a points line if you were doing Super Brew and you had to get the prediction right. So it wasn't really a question of loyalty to South Africa, but if you had to get the prediction right or as close as possible, what do you think?
I'm not going to answer you in terms of giving you a result, but South Africa have beaten New Zealand overseas and at home and away and other places. We're one of the few sides that could easily pitch up for the game and not be worried about the Kiwis. So the Kiwis are going to be set in World Cup mode. They're very good at that space. We're going to be set in trying to beat the Kiwi mode. And it's going to be our first game. It's going to be a lot of guys' first World Cups. Russie's going to have gone through a Once Were Warriors chat conversation with them. And I don't think it's going to be a massive margin with the Kiwis in favor. I think it's going to be a lot tighter. And in terms of who wins that to win the World Cup, that's a massive shout. But I like where your head's at, and we're always behind the Booker. So Booker to win.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for that, guys. I tell you, it was a bit of a leading question because I have seen, I think I saw some handicap of around 15 points. And to me, that first game, yes, New Zealand should start favourites, but I think it's going to be a mighty close game, and I think it's going to be decided, probably by one score, maybe at the end of the day. And can't wait for it to get going. Of course, we've got the matter of the Cricket World Cup coming up as well, so that will get us going. Just for any of you punters out there, you can get 100-1 that South Africa win both World Cups, but that might be a little bit ambitious. Guys, thanks very much for joining us on the show. Look forward to chatting about the tight five next week. I think we'll probably make the whole show about the tight five, and we'll cover all 5 positions. And it'll be good to hopefully former prop Donovan can join us for that one as well.
No, thanks a lot.
Excellent. Thanks, Donovan. Thanks, Couch. Thanks, Sean. Thanks very much for watching the video. If you are watching for the first time, you can go down below to subscribe. And don't miss our flagship rugby betting show. If you are into the betting side of things, that's at 9 o'clock every Thursday night, the handicap rugby chat that matters. We'll be back to discuss the tight five next week.